why I will be talking about why households, even in the most polluted cities in the world, don't use air purifiers. And this is co-authored work together with Ash Chaudhary at the International Growth Center in Dhaka, Tibrat Garg at UCSD, Maulik Jagnani at Tufts, and oh, okay, here we go. No. Okay, now, so the motivation for this project is that air pollution is one of the greatest external threats to human health, and it's estimated that it's causing more than 5 million deaths every year. It's fortunately a problem that has gotten better in many high-income countries, where health harms from air pollution has decreased by more than 20% over the last decade. Unfortunately, in low and middle-income countries, this is a problem that is still getting worse and has increased by 13% over the last decade. In South Asia alone, it's estimated that 1.4 million people die every year as a consequence of high air pollution. The good news is that air purifiers can reduce air pollution by as much as 80% within households, and they use about the same amount of electricity as a ceiling fan and costs only a little bit more than a ceiling fan. But the puzzle here is that very few households own air purifiers, even among middle-class households in the most polluted cities. This project is taking place in Bangladesh, which you can see here is the country in the world that is suffering the most from air pollution. And the bar here is indicating how many life years are lost on average in Bangladesh as a consequence of air pollution being higher than the WHO recommendations. And the small bar here is the bar for Singapore. So you can see that in Singapore, we lose about 10 months of life expectancy due to air pollution. In Bangladesh, people lose almost 5 years due to air pollution. The kind of secondary motivation for this paper comes from a more personal angle, where I was very thinking about why my parents-in-law didn't use air purifiers, and they live in the second most polluted country in the world, which is India. And my co-authors all think about the same thing, like, why aren't our parents using air purifiers despite living in these highly polluted cities? So that's kind of like a secondary motivation for all 4 of us working on this project. Okay, so this is an experiment with about 1,000 middle-class households in Dhaka. We provide air purifiers that looks like this, as well as air quality monitors to these households. And we'll start by telling you some stylized facts. I'll be showing you that air pollution is very high, both indoors and outdoors in Dhaka. But the awareness among people is only about outdoor air pollution. People have biased beliefs about how polluted the air inside of their own homes are. Second, I'll show you that demand for air purifiers is low, and less than 1% of households own an air purifier. And finally, I'll show you that even when we give people air purifiers for free, and even when we compensate them for the electricity that they use, the usage of air purifiers is very low. I'm then going to go into the experimental results, where I'll be showing you that giving people both an air purifier and an air monitor increases people's valuation of the air purifier and increases the usage of the air purifier. So giving people monitors alone correct beliefs about indoor air pollution, but it doesn't increase the valuation of air purifiers. Giving people air purifiers corrects people's beliefs about how effective air purifiers are, but it doesn't lead to people using them. So in order to explain these three experimental results, we provide a model where we're showing that the valuation of an air purifier, or your willingness to both buy one or use one, is dependent on two factors. You have to both believe that the air inside your home is polluted, and you have to believe that the air purifier can fix this problem. And only if you solve both of these biased beliefs does people actually value the air purifier and use it. And we're going to argue that this can kind of explain why some preventative health technologies takes off, while others are very slow in being adopted by households. In the interest of time, I'm going to skip over the literature review and start by showing you the study area. So we are going to do this experiment in 3 housing associations in Dhaka. These are middle-class housing associations, so 80% of households have at least one person in them with some tertiary education. Average monthly income is 63,000 Bangladeshi taka, and 34% of these households have an air conditioner, which is considered a luxury good in Bangladesh. The reason why we're doing this in middle-class households is twofold. One is that these apartments are well suited for the use of air purifiers. So we're not talking about people living in slums, and we're not talking about rural households that use solid fuel to cook their food. These are apartments that look more like the apartments that we're used to here in Singapore, where you can close the windows, you can close the doors, and you get a pretty well-insulated room where you can run an air purifier and where it has a big effect on the air pollution in that room. The second reason why we're looking at middle-class households is because we think that they are the most likely adopters of air purifiers. A lot of the elite of Dhaka are already using air purifiers, but this is like looking at a much broader segment of society where air purifier usage is still very low. We're doing the experiment in winter, partly because air pollution, as you can see here, is much higher in winter than it is in the rainy months or the summer months. And the second is that during winter, households typically feel comfortable closing the windows and closing the doors because it's cold. So in summer, if you don't have an AC, you want to keep your windows open. But in winter, most people are keeping their windows and doors closed, especially during night. Here is our research design. It's pretty complicated, so I'm going to go through it step by step. Here's the first phase of our research. We go to households, we study, and we do a short baseline survey where we ask them about their perceptions of air quality, as well as kind of what they do to protect themselves from air pollution. Then we randomly provide half of the households with air quality monitors, and half of the households do not get any monitors. And within the people who get monitors, we randomize half of them to get an incentive for sending us a text message every week, informing us what the air monitor is telling them at that moment. And this is just to make sure that people are paying attention to the monitor. But I'm not going to talk too much about this in the interest of time today. So here's a picture of the air monitors. They report PM 2.5 in terms of micrograms per cubic meter. But since that isn't a very natural unit for most people, we also provide households with a chart showing what these levels mean in terms of health harms. So we classify the PM 2.5 levels into good, moderate, unhealthy for sensitive groups, unhealthy, very unhealthy, and hazardous. And these are kind of descriptions of air pollution that comes from the US EPA. So the monitors continuously provide air pollution data to the households, but also to us as researchers. We connect these to the Wi-Fi that people have in their homes, and they are submitting information about the air pollution automatically to us. And using this data, we can show you the first fact, which is that outdoor air pollution is very high, but so is indoor air pollution. The red line here indicates indoor air pollution among the people who we don't give purifiers. And you can see that both of these lines are well above the WHO standards for the maximum air pollution you would want to have across a 24-hour period. The second fact is that in the survey that we did, we see that people have very biased beliefs about how much air pollution there is in their homes. So in reality, air pollution inside people's home is 78% of the air pollution outside of people's homes. But when we ask them, the average response is that the air pollution inside people's homes is just 43% of that outside. So people have an incorrect belief about this. And even more, when we ask people to say, how severe is the air pollution outside, most people say that it's severe. While when we ask them, how severe is it inside, only about 22% say that it's severe. Okay, so moving on to the second step of the experiment. Now we're 2 months in. So this is 2 months after we randomly gave out air monitors to some households and not to others. We go back, we do a more comprehensive second round survey, and we randomize who of these households that we give air purifiers and who we give no purifiers. But before we randomize people into getting a purifier or not getting a purifier, we ask them, how much are they willing to pay for an air purifier? And we do this with something that economists like to call a BDM mechanism, which is basically saying to people, tell me how much you're willing to pay. Then I'm going to draw a number randomly from a random number generator. And if that number is lower than what you said you were willing to pay, you're going to pay that number that was randomly drawn. So people are incentivized to tell us the truth about how much they're willing to pay. We then randomize people with air purifiers into 3 groups. A group with no compensation for electricity usage, a group with daily compensation, and a group with monthly compensation. And again, I'm not going to talk too much about the difference between daily and monthly compensation, but I'm going to show you that this compensation didn't have a big effect on usage of air purifiers. So to tell you a little bit of background about these air purifiers, in order to make sure that they actually worked, we tested them out in our office. And we found that the air purifiers, when used in real world conditions, but under proper usage, so we close the window, close the door, put it on medium, and this is what happens to air purifiers, to the air pollution in the room where we turn these air purifiers on. We see a rapid decline in air pollution by about 80%. And then when we turn them off here, you can see how it starts going back up towards the level in the rooms that don't have any purifiers. These air purifiers cost 16,500 taka, which is a substantial cost, but it's not out of reach for these middle-class households. The electricity cost is very low. You can run an air purifier at medium speed for about 12 hours a day and still pay less than $1 per month for the electricity. And when we install these air purifiers, we install them together with a smart plug that gives us data on how often people use these air purifiers continuously. So we will have continuous data on both the air quality in people's homes, as well as the purifier use. So this brings us to our third fact, which is that demand for air purifiers is low. We ask people, as I mentioned, how much they're willing to pay, and even the people who are willing to pay the most for an air purifier were not willing to pay the retail price. And this is consistent with that they didn't own an air purifier in the first place. If they had been willing to pay more, presumably they would have gone out and bought one. So on average, the willingness to pay for an air purifier is about 8.4% of the retail price. And this is consistent with a lot of findings in development economics and other fields, which shows that people are generally not willing to pay much for preventative health technologies. People are willing to pay a lot for curative health, but not for preventative. And this brings us to our final stage of our survey, or our experiment, where we do an end-line survey about 2 months after we gave out the air purifiers. And we randomize people into 3 groups, where we wanted to benchmark the effect of the different interventions that we did to make people use the purifiers against some monetary value. So we incentivized people by giving them 5 taka per hour that they use the air purifier, or 10 taka per hour that they use the air purifier. And these are big incentives. If people were to run the air purifier 24 hours a day, this would amount to something like 5% of their monthly income. And we're going to use that to benchmark how effective these other interventions were. Okay, let me see how far I am. The experimental results. So the first experimental result is that the air quality monitor corrects people's beliefs about indoor air pollution. So when we look at the effect of the monitors on perceptions of outdoor air pollution, we don't see anything. People think that outdoor air pollution is bad, and people know that even without looking at an indoor monitor. However, I mentioned that people have these biased beliefs about how harmful the air inside of their own homes is. And when we give people air monitors, this misperception is corrected to a certain extent. So more people think that the air pollution inside of their own homes is kind of a severe problem after having been given the air monitor than for the households that were not given the air monitor. But this fails to translate into a higher willingness to pay for the air purifiers. So even within the group that were shown that the air quality inside of their own homes was bad, people were not willing to pay for an air purifier. So this was a bit disappointing for us. We wanted to increase the uptake and increase the adoption of these air purifiers, but it's not that easy. The second result is that owning an air purifier dramatically shifts how effective you think that an air purifier is. So here's the share of people who believes that an air purifier can reduce the air pollution in a room by more than 50%. Among the control group, this is the group that did not receive an air purifier. About 20% of people believed that an air purifier would reduce their air pollution in the room in which it was used by 50% or more. But among the group that did receive the air purifiers, we can see a stark increase in how effective they think that air purifiers are. So much more, something like 50% of the people say that an air purifier would reduce the air pollution in the room that it's used by more than 50%. But among people who only received air purifiers, the usage was still low. So among the people who only received air purifiers, we see that on most days, there were no usage at all. There's some people who used it for 10, some people who used it for 30, some people who used it for 90 minutes, and so on. But in general, the usage rates were very disappointing. And this is even when we compensated them for the electricity cost. So it's not that people are not able or willing to pay the electricity cost. We're compensating them for that. So the cost of running these is only like the attention cost of turning them on and the slight inconvenience of listening to the kind of hum of the air purifier in the background. But then when we looked at usage among the people who had air purifiers alone and people who had air purifiers together with air monitors, we see that there's much higher usage, something like 270% higher usage among the people who have both a purifier and a monitor. And that's this red bar here. They are using their air purifiers for almost 2 hours per day, while the people who only have an air purifier and no monitor only use it for about 30 minutes per day. And this effect is sustained over time. So you can see here kind of how often people use, how many minutes a day that people use the air purifier from the day that they got it. So on the day that you get something new, you're very excited, you use it a lot. And then just even 2 or 3 days later, usage declines But for people with a monitor, it declines to a higher level than for people without a monitor. And to kind of give you a sense of how big this effect is in terms of monetary value, like how much would you have to pay someone to use the purifier as much as if you give them a monitor? You can see that the incentives we gave were 5 taka and 10 taka. And as you know, this is no surprise to us, especially not to economists. You pay people to do something, they do it. So, you know, the people who got these incentives, they use their purifier much more. The people who got higher incentives, they use their purifier even more. But these effects, the effect of the monitor is similar to an effect of giving people an incentive of 5 taka per day, which was a substantial incentive to use the air purifier. In other words, you're going to have to pay people a lot to make them use the purifier as much as if you give them an air monitor. And we find among the people who got both a purifier and a monitor, when we asked them at the end line survey, how much would we have to pay them in order for them to be willing to sell the purifier back to us, they state a higher value than the people who had just a purifier without the monitor. So when we ask them, you know, state the valuation of the purifier, and then we're going to draw a random number. And if you stated a number that was lower than the random number, we're going to pay you the random number and we're going to take your purifier away. These were the average numbers that they stated. So this was real incentivized, truth-telling by the households. And we believe that this is, good evidence that having a purifier together with a monitor makes you value the purifier more. So to summarize the results, we show that access to monitors corrects beliefs about indoor air pollution, but fails to increase the demand for the purifiers. We show that experience with purifiers corrects beliefs about the effectiveness of the purifiers, but even with these corrected beliefs, people rarely use them. Finally, we show that access to both monitors and purifiers increases the usage of households, the usage of the purifiers, and the valuation of the purifiers. So to kind of tie this together, we have a formal model, but I'll just give you the intuition here. And the intuition is that you value a technology by how severe the problem that it's solving is, multiplied by how big of a decrease in the problem you think that the technology will achieve. So if you don't think that there is an air pollution problem in your home, your valuation of the health technology will be 0. If you think the product is useless, the valuation of the product will be 0. And so if either of these two things is very low, the valuation will be very low. And increasing one of them while not increasing the other is not going to have any effect. But if you increase both of them, that's when you start seeing effects. And this is exactly what we see in our experiment. One other thing that we show is that we think about where do these perceptions come from when you have no kind of experience with a purifier or you don't have an air monitor at home. And if you don't have an air monitor at home, we think that you get your perception of how bad air quality is by the community. So, the community beliefs becomes your beliefs unless you have another source of information. Similarly, with air purifiers, you think that air purifiers are as effective as the community thinks that air purifiers are, unless you have direct evidence from your own experience. And this leads to there being kind of two equilibrium. So one is where everyone has correct beliefs, and they use the air purifiers and they buy the air purifiers. Another is a bad equilibrium where everyone has kind of downward biased beliefs, and it's very hard to shift out of that bad equilibrium. Because even if you shift people's beliefs about air pollution, it won't change anything. And even if you change their beliefs about air purifiers, it won't change anything. But you need to change both at the same time in order to kind of move from the bad equilibrium to the good equilibrium. Okay, so we also want to talk a little bit about how this relates to other papers in the literature on air pollution. So there are papers on air pollution showing that if you increase the information about air pollution, you see that demand for masks increase. And we think that that's because masks is a technology in South Asia that people have experience with. They know how they work. They kind of trust that they work, at least to a certain extent. So it makes sense, according to our model, that when you change beliefs about the severity of the problem, if you think that the solution is effective, you'll value the solution more. But there's another study using a similar design that looks at air purifiers, the willingness to pay for air purifiers, and they show that even when you correct people's beliefs about air pollution, it doesn't lead to an increase in the willingness to pay for air purifiers. But there's 2 studies in China showing that when you correct people's beliefs about air pollution in China, the demand for air purifiers increase. And we think that that is because people have more experience with air purifiers in China and believe the technology more there. So the kind of community beliefs that they are absorbing are much higher than what they are in South Asia. So let's see here. To kind of conclude, we think that our model can explain why some health technologies, such as water filters, which are very common among these middle-class households that we do our study with. Everyone has a water filter to filter their drinking water. These are health technologies that took off by themselves without promotion from the government. And that's because people had a belief that the water, if you drink it, you'll get sick. And the water filter is working because it's easier to kind of try out by yourself. You use the filtered water and you check if you get sick the next day, so you can kind of increase your beliefs more easily, and that's why certain health technologies take off. While other health technologies, such as air purifiers, some vaccines, clean cook stoves, have not seen this take off because one of the 2 sources of valuation is missing. All right, so wrap up. We propose a simple yet powerful model to explain why so few households are using air purifiers. The key policy implication is that it's insufficient to correct beliefs about just one thing, air pollution or purifier effectiveness, but you have to correct beliefs about both. And the policy implications of this is that we have to subsidize air purifiers to a point where people are willing to buy them, where we shift beliefs in the community about how effective they are. And then we can perhaps stop subsidizing them as the community beliefs have shifted. And we also believe that information campaigns explaining that air pollution is almost as bad indoors as it is outdoors will be needed. And our team is planning to write kind of op-eds in Bangladeshi newspapers over the winter, arguing for this, making sure that people kind of update their biased beliefs. And finally, I want to say, going back to the more personal motivation, that if you are giving an air purifier to a loved one, please give it together with an air monitor so that they end up using it. Thank you.
Thank you, Martin, for that really illuminating talk. And we'll now open the floor for questions. And I guess do I use this? Okay, so I guess I'll hand you the mic as and when you're ready to ask your question.
We need to use this for the correct. Yeah. Thank you. This is super interesting, Martin. So I had a few questions. I had many questions, but I'll start with maybe thinking about the nature of the households and if that matters. So, you've you're super interested in explaining why households are reluctant. So does the size of households matter? Does it matter if there are elderly in the household? Does it matter if there are children in the household? Does it matter who in the household is making a decision? Is there with like cook stoves, for example, lot of studies show that there's a very clear gendered explanation for reluctance of households to invest in that expense, right? So is there a element explaining, kind of gender and power decision making in the household over considering this a harm, right? So how do households think about harm? Does who's in the household matter? That's one set of questions. And the second, I was super intrigued by the variation in hours of use. So when people got monitors and they did start using, is there anything, can you tell us a bit more about that? Is there anything interesting there about when people use, what hours of the day? Again, maybe that's a clue to thinking about how people's beliefs and thoughts about harm are shifting. Why is 1 hour of the day more harmful or more beneficial to use it than not? Again, so in terms of technology use and thoughts about harm, should we think about, pay attention to that usage, aspect of usage? Thank you.
Great questions. Since it's two of them, I'm just going to answer them straight away. And I'm going to start at the end and talking about kind of when people are using air purifiers. So here we're comparing households with purifiers only and households with purifiers and monitors. And we show that when air pollution outdoors is higher, then people with monitors use their air purifiers disproportionately more than when air pollution outdoors is low, as measured by the kind of the cards that we gave together with the monitors. So that could be a clue in terms of like, how do monitors help households like figure out when to use these air purifiers? In terms of differences between different households who have different characteristics, this is a great question. It's something that we have to do more work on, just understanding what kind of descriptively can make a household use an air purifier versus not. And we just haven't dug into the data very much there yet.
Thank you. Thank you for some of the fascinating insights here. I was wondering if you could share your thoughts on ventilation as a variable that kind of seeps into the perception of air quality here. And the reason I'm asking is because for a lot of the households that perhaps one is acquainted with, there's a certain kind of, there's no clear delineation between the inside and the outside so far as managing ventilation is concerned. And I'm asking this from the point of view of community's perception of space. And if there's a clear demarcation of inside and outside here, that kind of plays into how we manage circulation of air itself, that perhaps also could be a way in which the community ends up thinking about pollution, which ties up to another question I had, which is of the role of evidence. When we think of evidence and what they do for people, how far do we also need to think about capacities people have to act on that evidence, tying it up to how do people think of indoor spaces and outdoor spaces here? And if there is a neat delineation here between the indoor and the outdoor, that could possibly be resulting in the kind of statistics we're seeing here.
Okay, so great questions. Thank you so much. In terms of delineation between the indoor and the outdoor, I think people have a relatively clear sense of what is like inside of their apartment and what is outside of their apartment. It's not the case where you, as you have in many rural areas, where you have like kind of open spaces which are maybe roofed, and it's not like a clear demarcation of where the outdoor begins and where the indoor kind of ends. These are apartments with an apartment door, and once you go outside of the apartment door, you're outside of the apartment. In terms of ventilation, so just the basic facts are that if you're cooking, you should open the window to reduce air pollution. But if you're not cooking or not smoking or not running a mosquito coil, then you should shut the windows to reduce air pollution inside of your apartment. So that's a little bit tricky because during certain times you should open the windows and during certain times you should shut the windows. But in general, my sense is that during the winter, people ventilate their apartment during the kind of middle of the day. So that's when we see air pollution outside kind of being the same as air pollution inside. So like during these hours, like noon and in the afternoon, people tend to have open windows because it's warm and it's nice to get the breeze in, while during the rest of the day, like in the late night and during when they're sleeping, they tend to close the windows and close the doors. I'm not sure if that fully explains, fully answers your question, but that's kind of the best I have.
Yeah, thanks for all the data, Martin. As a chemist, I like to see data, and I'm like, where are the error bars? But you had error bars on the bar plots. This is both, depressing to me, and because also usually we in science we think about like, oh, if we come up with the next nanomaterial, we're gonna help the world, and like your data shows absolutely not. I mean, like really running a fan through a little piece of plastic or paper, and people still would not adopt it. But on the other hand, this also shows opportunity because I was always amazed by this Japanese thing that you put on your forehead or in your heels and they turn black. So maybe, and they're completely ridiculous. Scientifically, we use them to make fun of people and to say, oh, how people drink acid water, alkaline water, and pay $20 or 20,000 DACA. So in your next study, I don't know if this will continue, have you considered other less scientific ways of like tricking people? Because seriously, like that monitor, I don't know how much that air monitor costs, but probably for a tenth of its price, you can get some piece of plastic or cotton that turns pitch black or whatever culturally nasty color is. Like it has to be red or yellow, whatever, like that. We can ask the social scientists. And that might actually, for people to actually see that it's nasty and show off to the grandma next door, wow, look, my air is not so nasty today. Yours is yellow, mine is not, something like that. And then the other one is social media, although that probably, because this is the role of influencers. So those in the arts, I mean, scientists, sorry, we're not going to save the world because no matter what we do, people will still do terrible things and to themselves and to others. So have you also considered getting influencers, getting people to shame or to like start bragging about it? Because again, like it's really cool to get your randomized study, like with the price. But honestly, I don't know how much I trust whether people would pay. But if it's for their cell phone, they might be able to pay 10 times their monthly income, I'm guessing. So culture definitely plays a role. So like those studying,
Yeah. These are all great ideas. I think I can tell you about some of the things we considered, but we ended up not doing. So one of the things when we piloted this was to give out air purifiers where the filter can be seen. So over time, as you run the fan and it pushes the air through the filter gets like blacker and blacker and blacker. And one of the problems that we had with that was that people kind of thought that it looked so terrible that they didn't want to like have it in their house. So they threw out the purifier because it looked dirty and black. So that was like one of the learning moments in the pilot, that we should not have air purifiers where you can see how dirty the filter gets over time, because no one wants to see that in their house. In terms of like influencers, yeah, I think, there's a lot of studies on like who should you kind of disseminate a message through in order to get the biggest effect. And having respected leaders in the community go out with this message would probably be great for us. And also having like people who are connected to many other people disseminating this information would probably be great for us as well. But it's not something we've studied specifically in this paper.
Thank you for the presentation. I'm very interested, like, why people stop using the air purifier after the first few days. So it seems like there are some psychological efforts when you turn on and turn off the purifier. But what is the benefit psychologically? Do people even feel better after like using the purifier? Yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, basically this graph here shows you that they don't feel that much better after using the purifier. Like I would guess that if you had a air conditioner and this was summer and it was hot, the graph wouldn't look like this at all. If you gave people air conditioners and you compensated them for the electricity cost of the air purifier, air conditioner, people would just run it all the time because it makes you feel good right there in the moment. With an air purifier, you have the problem that you have to kind of convince people at like a logical, deeper level that the air is harmful for you, even if you can't see the dirt in the air. And running this purifier, even though you can't see anything getting better, that is better for you. And I think that's where the monitor really helps, because you can see both that the air is dirty, and you can see how when you run the purifier, the pollution levels go down.
Yeah, I feel like the objective number reduced in the monitor does really help. But I wonder if we can add some like conclusion or hints after every day's use of the purifier, saying, okay, you get like how much % of healthier than if you don't use the air purifier, something like that, to encourage them to continue use it.
Yeah, I mean, so the evidence on this is really not that great. So there hasn't been any study that has managed to do like air purifiers at large scale and show the health benefits. So we don't know exactly what the health benefits of air purifiers are. We know that polluted air is bad for you. We know that air purifiers reduce polluted air, but we haven't seen a study that goes all the way to the health effects. We were hoping to do that, but because people use the air purifier so little, the effects overall on air pollution are quite small. So we can't go the next step and show the effects on health outcomes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks very much for that. I just want to counter some of the pessimism and the, there's a great tendency of economists to assume human beings are irrational, and we certainly can be, but we can also be quite rational as well. And so your comparison with the water filtration I thought was quite good. You put a water filter on your tap and then it works. Every single time you want to drink, you go to that tap and it works. If we had something that every single time you breathed, it cleaned the air, we probably would use it if it was as unobtrusive as the water filter. So maybe part of the problem is that the air purifiers are just not good enough, in as much as you've got to sit in a room and it's got to be closed, right? And most people calculate, well, I have to go out, I've got to go to work, I've got to go to the shops, and I've got to open the door because people are coming in and out. And as you mentioned, when I cook, I open the window, and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of reasons why, if you think logically about the air purifier, it's only going to be moderately successful, even if you're really diligent about it. And you do have to be quite diligent about it as well. So I think those factors probably play in. I mean, like, if you're thinking about how to get people to use this, make it a part of their life where it's as unobtrusive as possible, and connecting it to an air conditioner would be, the obvious thing. Every time you turn the air conditioner on, it purifies the air as well. And I'm sure if that happened, your use would go up a lot.
Yeah. So one problem with the great comments, one problem with the air conditioner idea is this graph here, that during the summer, when you would want to use an air conditioner, and when 34% of these households use an air conditioner, air pollution levels are just much, much lower. So to fix the problem during the winter months here, like the air conditioner idea doesn't really work. Second, I think in defense of economists, or maybe in defense of human beings, our model is a purely rational model, in the sense that it's purely rational not to value a product that you don't think works. So it's a model of incorrect beliefs as opposed to irrational behavior. So given that people have irrational beliefs, they act perfectly rational. In terms of how big is the effect of the purifier? So I have some, let's see if I can go to the appendix. So here's like the effect that we see when people turn on the purifier in their own homes. So again, this is like, we don't know if the doors were open. We don't know, like, this is just data from people's homes when they turn on the purifier. And we see this, substantial, although it's smaller, the decrease compared to when we do it in a controlled condition. So I do think that the purifiers work as technology. I do think it's not implausible that people, would just put it in the bedroom. When they go to bed at night, they turn it on. And when they wake up in the morning, they turn it off. But, as the study shows, it is quite hard to get it to work. And getting it to work in a way that requires no effort at all from the human might be better. So like if we could have an air purifier that sensed when the doors were closed and the conditions were such that it should be running, and you could just have it on and it turns itself on and off automatically, I think that would be kind of going a bit towards what you are thinking of as the ideal technology. So to any engineers in the room, if you are thinking of inventing an air purifier like that, I would love to test it out with these households.
I am just to follow up on that briefly. It did occur to me the obvious time to use it would be at night, because now you are in a closed room and you're just going to sleep. So is there a reason people don't turn it on when they go to sleep? Is it noisy? Is it bright? I mean,
It's not bright. It doesn't have any kind of light or, it doesn't generate any light, but it is there is a bit of a noise. In the back of your mind, you have to keep that Dhaka is one of the most noise polluted cities in the world. Although at night, it's not as bad as during the day. But I think that the additional noise that an air purifier does on top of the noise that is already there in the kind of background noise is relatively small. And when we asked people, like, why didn't you use it? Very few people said that the sound levels were the problem. It was more, some people mentioned electricity cost, and a lot of people mentioned that they're just like forgot to kind of use it, or, it doesn't make a difference.
I just had a quick question about in the model that you're using, right? There was a mention of community beliefs playing a part in perhaps shaping behavior, positively so. I was just curious about your definition of community. And do you mean the neighborhoods that you were studying, or do you mean like a territorial community, like a religious community, or what sort of community you were specifically referring to?
That's a great question, and I don't have a great answer. But so I should clarify that when we say that perceptions come from community beliefs, this is like how we model people's behavior. So that's like a hypothesis, and we don't have strong evidence that that's what's going on, strong empirical evidence. So the community, I think, would be the people whose homes you go to and who you talk about these issues with. But I don't know exactly who people get their beliefs from when they don't have any idea from their own experience. That's, I think, an open question.
You can see the disciplinary differences in the questions, the psychologists, the sociologists. Any other questions here?
Hi. So I'm actually curious about when the usage of the purifiers. Do you have any data on the timing, like time of day of usage, like in the morning and the evening? And descriptively, do you have any information about that, how it varies? Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I wish I had included that line here. So we had a line with usage in this graph as well. We see that usage typically is a little bit higher during the day than during the night, but it's pretty flat throughout the day. It's not like that everyone uses it during one specific period and not during a different period. I think that some people use it at night and some people use it during the day, and on average that kind of evens out.
We do have a question on Zoom, apparently, so.
Okay. So the question is, hi, can I check the type of smart plugs that the team uses? It was mentioned that it sends data to the research team on usage of air purifiers. Yeah, we use a locally produced smart plug that a company in Bangladesh is doing. I'm trying to remember the company name now, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. And basically, how the way that the smart plug works is that it measures how much electricity that goes through the smart plug, and then sends that information via the Wi-Fi to kind of our data server, and to make sure that the air purifier kind of stayed connected to the smart plug. When we installed it, we put like a tiny bit of super glue to make sure that the smart plug is not disconnected from the air purifier. Yeah, I think that answers the question.
Okay, we have time for one last question. Okay.
Thank you. I wonder if people's perception on pollution levels would differ if you did it in summer versus winter. Like I assume like most pollution we see is in the form of heat, like smoke, car exhaust. So I'm just thinking like might people equate hot is like more dirty and oh, because it feels cold, it's like cleaner. Just my assumption.
No, I think people understand that when it rains, especially, that clears the air. And outdoors, the air pollution is very visible during winter. It's this thick smog. So if you look outside your window, it looks like a haze, a gray haze, or a kind of light brownish haze. And during the summer, the sky is much more often blue. So, I think that people understand that air pollution is much worse in winter than it is during the summer. And because when the air is polluted inside your own home, you rarely have so much space inside your own home that you can see that haze, because the haze, you need to look for, hundreds of meters through the air before it becomes hazy. So I think that's part of the reason why we have these misperceptions that the air outside is polluted, but not indoors, because it's much harder to see the air pollution indoors compared to when you look outside the window.
I actually do think we have time for maybe one short comment or question. Yes.
Hi, thank you so much for your presentation. I was just wondering, because I think earlier you were sharing about other kind of ways that you had like piloted the study. So say, like letting people see what the purifier looks like, when it's through with a lot of use. So I was wondering if like the upkeep of, or the perception of upkeep of air purifiers could have anything to do with the results that you saw. So it's like maybe people are aware that, like by using it, that it's gonna, become more difficult to upkeep, or if I'm not sure if during the study period that if it was not over such a long period of time that they didn't have to encounter this. Yeah.
Yeah. So the recommendation from the manufacturer is that you change the filter every 6 to 12 months. And the period that we're looking over here is less than 3 months. So I don't think that people stopped using the purifiers because they became ineffective. It's more a question of that, the novelty effect of having a new item in your household kind of decreases very quickly after just 1 or 2 days. And then people kind of settle into a steady state usage of this item. Yeah, so I think that these are all kind of short-term effects. We will start looking at effects now that winter is starting again. We are still getting data from these households, and we can see how much these households are using the air purifiers like in the next year. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Martin. This was really great and so much to think about. I'm never going to look at an air purifier or monitor the same way again. Thanks a lot. Lunch, I believe, is ready and it's outside the room right here. So those of you who've registered, again, please help yourself. And if you've not registered, just hang around and maybe a box becomes available. Thank you so much for coming and hope to see you in future seminar series.